Welcome to CXD, the podcast from Engine, where we explore how to reimagine and deliver customer experiences. Now, recently we've been talking a lot about experiences in aviation, and I wanted to broaden that conversation out into other sectors, notably rail actually. Now, we know that sustainability is a critical factor in all travel sectors, and rail in particular seems poised to offer new challenges and opportunities to other modes of transport. So, on today's episode, I wanted to talk with a customer experience leader whose career spans aviation and rail. I'm really delighted today to be joined by Nik Lusardi, who brings over 27 years of experience driving innovation in customer service, from leading transformation products at places like Virgin Atlantic Airways to shaping the future of rail travel at HS2 and the Great British Rail Transition Team. Now, Nik's passion for creating human-centered experiences and operational excellence makes him a visionary, and a very infectious visionary, as you'll see when we talk to him in the field. Nik, it's fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Lovely to be here, Ollie. My pleasure.
Now, Nik, you're developing a really, really exciting product for the rail industry, but we're going to get into that in a bit. But before we do, could you just spend a few moments kind of setting the scene on some of the customer experience challenges and perhaps some of the big trends that both aviation and rail are facing at the moment, and what perhaps some of the opportunities are that you see?
I think, I mean, they're very different fields. Where aviation, there seems to be a lot more money available, in particular, to spend on customer experience than in rail. That being said, I think that also means that within rail, there's a huge opportunity for them to make big strides and improvements within customer experience on the offer that they will produce for the future customer, and in particular, attracting people to the railway. Aviation has been very much driven by the existing brands, or the brands that exist within the aviation world, and they've driven and created their own kind of identities, and then they've used that to kind of try to develop more market share, or to actually take market share from each other, and it's a much more competitive industry from that perspective, whereas the rail tends to be much more about, actually, it's very kind of similar from the point of view, you have these brands that operate the railway, but they're very much restricted within the requirements that the government in the UK in particular put on them. There isn't some competitive nature that exists within the rail industry compared to the airline industry internationally. Some of the trends that I've kind of identified recently, I think in both sectors really is about staying ahead of the game, and actually it's actually being able to customer base has a very kind of clear set of requirements that they've developed over years, which has come from also the technological advances that we've seen with mobile phones and the way we communicate today. So information travels very, very quickly. Hence, this podcast today is one of those modes which have kind of really pushed information to people far, far quicker than it ever did. And also, you're at the behest of somebody's good or bad report on the service that you've provided. So therefore, people and companies have to react very, very quickly to those kind of ever shifting and moving changes that we see in both the sectors. I think where rail is quite interesting, the fact is there's always been, it's kind of lagged a little bit from aviation for the reasons I've just suggested. And I think you have sectors such as like the car industry, the level of kind of comfort in particular has kind of risen dramatically over the last decade, 2 decades, and in particular quality of kind of the products that they produce as well. So therefore that's kind of created a bit of a void between where rail sits today and where maybe some other sectors sit in transport.
So Nik, I was really interested to kind of understand how would you sort of compare how perhaps airlines and rail companies understand their customers' needs and meet their needs. Do they have the same amount of understanding about that, or are they very, very different?
Well, if I can speak quite frankly, because having worked in both sectors and got an understanding, I do think that the attention to detail within the aviation sector is far greater than it is in rail. I think that is quite a contentious thing to say, but I think it's definitely apparent to me, having worked for a company like Virgin Atlantic, where there was no stone left unturned for actually creating a customer experience that the customers wanted, but also delivering that as well, doing their utmost to deliver it. I think there is a sense that sometimes, and this is my opinion, but sometimes I've seen that within rail, customer and customer experience in particular seems to be the kind of low hanging fruit. or has been the low hanging fruit.
Why is that? Is that all about the limits of regulation? There's the way franchises are operated. They don't have room or time to invest in customer experience, or they feel they have like a captive audience. They don't have to worry because people have to get on trains anyway.
I think there is the captive audience piece as well, but I think it's also the way that potentially the railway is constructed, in a way that, you know, the measures are put in place that are dictated by, you know, the basically the government, essentially, the policies that they kind of, in a way, they kind of stifle creativity. And because again, it all comes down to money as well, and you know that there has to be parity. You know, the way that things like the ticket system as well, that it's one ticket system, which has been, you know, it's been in the press for years how confusing the ticketing system is, and so much so that you've seen people innovating and creating kind of split ticketing to work around the system to give the customer better value for money. And I forget how many tens of thousands permutations of tickets there are in the UK. I remember that I can't really remember it from my days at HS2, but it's incredible. And so to expect the customer to kind of understand this is really, really, you know, it's not something that we should really expect, because, and it's no wonder that people are confused. There's a lot of safety involved. There's a lot of people who focus on kind of operational robustness and about timekeeping, etc. There does seem to be there has in the past, I should say, it's getting better, but there definitely has been a disconnect between the customer and the kind of the rail operator. And it's been to the detriment of the customer. You know, sorry.
No, go on. No, sorry, finish your thought. Me butting in.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, there's this notion, you know, is that I don't know whether it's fair or not for me to say this, and maybe slightly controversial, but there is a sense of apathy, you know, is that these people will travel. And I think what COVID has shown us as well is actually, you know, the railway isn't this impregnable fortress. It can suffer just as much as any other industry as well. It's not, you know, there used to be a time when it was a dead cert that you're going to get certain amount of people traveling in rush hour every day, and therefore, you know, this is the amount of money that the railway was going to bring in. But as we see now, one humongous kind of like catastrophe in the UK, a pandemic that happens, and it flips everything upside down, and all of a sudden you have to kind of rethink where we are.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, COVID had a massive impact on so many industries and everybody, you know, in the UK and across the world. I think it has led to a lot of innovation. It's also led to a massive sort of acceleration in terms of how, you know, everyday people want to use things, what's important to them, the way they use technology, and that's created lots of opportunities. I was wondering, what do you feel are the really kind of big kind of customer experience opportunities in rail today? You know, you've spoken about the problems of ticketing and all that kind of stuff aside. What are the big opportunities that you see it from a customer experience point of view?
I think for me, and this is something again that the aviation industry struggled with, was knowing their customer. I think they've got a handle on that now. So the customer databases, people knowing what each customer needs, and I think where we are, I mentioned technology earlier on. I don't feel like technology is being used effectively. I think we all walk around with basically our lives in our pockets. This little pocket of, you know, kind of rectangle that basically holds so much information and gives us so much information as well. I really don't think that that's being used effectively within customer experience sectors. So within the customer experience within rail in particular, I think, you know, things like we are seeing the advent of kind of reservation systems getting more advanced, but there's more that can be done, especially in that sense, which is some of the work that I did at HS2 was looking at actually what customers in particular in rail are what information they're willing to give the operating company or companies that provide a service in return for something that benefits them. And I think this is where I think there's really opportunities here about understanding what the customer's needs are. Therefore, you can tune your experience that you provide to those customers. And eventually we will get to a point, especially with the advent of AI, etc., where, you know, billions of kind of calculations are being made in a second, where this will help from the point of view of knowing who the person is sat in seat 26A, for instance, and knowing that that person is getting off at a certain point, can you send a notification to them to get them ready to disembark the train, for instance, to get their bags ready to stop, for instance, them feeling so anxious. Know where their baggage is as well on board the train, and know that it's safe. Also order food so that they don't have to leave their seat and they can continue to work. If they're working on a really important project, can they actually get somebody to deliver them a cup of coffee and it's already paid for? No, this is stuff that we already see in the aviation world, and that, for me, there's no rhyme or reason why that can't happen in rail. And in particular, in the UK, we have this service which is amazing in itself, but it's also our Achilles heel, which is this turn up and go service that we have in rail. Now, that is very difficult to manage from an operations perspective, because you never quite know how many seats are occupied and how many are full, because the reservation system doesn't really talk to a wider kind of system that feeds back. Operators, there's a converse to that, which is a good operation creates good customer experience. So if they have a slicker operation where they know that certain seats are unavailable or available, then people can move and shift and change around the carriages as they in their own time and as they feel. So they have a choice. That's just something. There's some of the ideas that are in my head.
No, it's amazing. I mean, it's so true, isn't it? Like that, just what technology affords us, how it can directly impact on some of the biggest challenges that customers talk about not getting seats, about overcrowding, being able to make reservations, as you say, getting more services and just the sort of the personalization of their experience. It's an enormous amount that can be done. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, Nik, is you're developing a really, really exciting product, which seems to have kind of come straight out of your experience with aviation and lands in rail. Could you talk a little bit about where that came from and begin to introduce the audience to this amazing product you've conceived?
I have a company called Future Travel Studio, which was incorporated in 2021, and it's very much a startup organization. When I set this up with my partners, then what we wanted to do, we had a vision, which was to consult and to be able to consult in customer experience, design thinking, help with strategic kind of alignment for change, and using those techniques. And that was one half of the company kind of proposition. The other side of it was product development and idea generation. And so we, as part of it, kind of organically, and it wasn't kind of set out this way, but we worked with a client on a piece of work actually within rail to help them understand their fit within the rail market. They were already in rail, but they were looking to potentially expand into rail, and they wanted to kind of go through a process of working out whether it was a viable solution for them. And it was really interesting. And we as part of that process, and I won't name any names because I don't want to embarrass people.
What sort of company were they? Were they an operator? Were they a manufacturer? What were they?
They were actually a service. They were a service provider. So they were actually a bigger organization that spans across. They're a multinational company that spans across many different kind of service sectors, and they provide services within those sectors. So we were introduced to the exec team that ran the transportation side of things, and in particular rail. And as part of that exercise, as we were going through the development with them, which was a really, really interesting process, and culminated in a really lovely piece of work, one we're all very proud of. The penny dropped when I was in a workshop with them, and the penny dropped for me is that actually I've got all of this experience that I gained from working for Virgin Atlantic for over 12 years of working in trying essentially to fit as many people comfortably into a tube in the air, which is arguably one of the most difficult environments to actually design for. And I'm not just saying that because I worked in it, but it is very, very, there's so much regulation and kind of certification that has to go through to get something over the line. And I thought, well, actually, rail is not too dissimilar to this. And can I start to I could see there was a line of sight for me around taking what I'd learned in aviation and transposing that to rail. But having got to know rail, I understand that, let's just say there's companies that don't have as deeper pockets as the aviation companies do. And equally, there is not this right now. They're a little bit behind the curve, in particular around using some of the more exotic materials and seeing the benefits of those, because they cost so much money.
Yeah. So what opportunity did you spot then? What's the product? What did you do?
So the product is a. So I'm glad you asked me that, Ollie. So the actual product itself is a lie flat. It's a seat that converts into a lie flat bed. So, it creates a pod. So we had looked at the sleeper products that exist in the UK, and it was quite interesting that there's a few things. We went through a discovery phase, which was quite a long discovery phase, and I'm really pleased that we went through this, because we started to learn about actually where the market is, or where the potential market is in the future. And it made us we lifted our heads up from the tarmac a little bit, and we started looking further afield than just the UK as well, because we realised obviously there's a groundswell of interest in sleeper products, long distance products in Europe.
Why is that happening? Why are sleepers becoming more of a thing now than they have been before? Surely a sleeper, when I hear sleeper, I think of some sort of Orient Express, some sort of yesteryear thing that Miss Marple would go on. Why are sleepers becoming a thing now?
Well, I guess it's again down to technology and the fact that we all live very busy lives, but we also have these kind of merging lives as well, which we have kind of leisure and and business are kind of merged. And in particular from the advent of what happened with COVID, whereby we work from home, we work flexibly, much more flexibly than we ever did. So therefore, I think what's happened is that there's a couple of things at play in Europe, and these translate as well to the UK as well. And one of them is that there's the sustainability piece around flying in Europe. So I think it was legislation or maybe a white paper that was written by, and it was actually implemented in France, whereby if there's a train journey, roughly I think around 2.5 hours, if you could travel somewhere with it on a train in 2.5 hours, then they've embargoed flight to that destination.
Oh,
so so obviously from that perspective, that's France being quite, they're being quite kind of forward thinking, I think, in that space. No, we haven't seen that that's translated into Europe yet, but that obviously sets the scene for a sustainability position going forward for the rest of Europe, because people will take notice of this, and it's quite, forward thinking, and I think it's great. It's really great to see somebody putting their best foot forward for this. Obviously, there will be people that say that ultimately this might not, it might not be as viable as they probably anticipate it being, but at least it's a move. It's a shift forward. So it's in line with way people are thinking now about the environment and about how they can kind of start to do things positively towards improving the environmental aspects and issues that we have.
So that's really interesting. So there's a bit of legislation being developed, which is ultimately the outcome is about improved sustainability, and they're saying less planes, more trains. The sleeper, so that's coming to the fore, because is it literally about sleeping, or is it just about comfort? Is what's wrong with existing sleeper products? What does your product do? It's called DreamSuite, isn't it? What does DreamSuite do that other existing products don't do?
So lots of sleeper products tend to be what we would call as a couchette arrangement. So it's a cabin essentially that you rent for the period of time you're traveling. So it would have bunk beds in there. Some of them have double beds. So it's very opulent from the point of view of
like a really old-fashioned train. Like a really old-fashioned train, you should walk down the side of the carriage and then turn into your cabin into your cubicle. Four things. Got you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are fantastic, but they come at a premium, and also they take up a lot of space. And so if you really want a full bed in a train environment, then there is a consequence to that from an operating standpoint, is that you only can get a certain amount of these on a train. So if we look at the UK in particular, some of the operators that operate a night service right now, the space efficiencies are not great, but equally there's also how do you manage people, because and I'm not completely clear on the legislation or whether it was actually the rolling stock operators that actually instigate this, but there was a situation where you used to be able to book a bed and you would share a space with a stranger. Now that is no longer the case. So if you're traveling as a couple, you can have a double berth, and that's fine, and you pay for that. If you're a single occupant, and you want to have your own space, or you can no longer book a bed with another person, another stranger. Now that came in a while back, and so that's the disadvantage. And I'm not clear whether that is the case in Europe, but I would imagine there probably is something similar, because it's a bit of a kind of grey area, really. And therefore, what this does is it's actually part of DreamSuite, and the idea of DreamSuite is about democratizing actually sleep on a train. Whereas I don't feel the couchette allows for that, because there's a limited amount of couchettes available, but they tend to get booked up because they're very, very popular. They have a very kind of particular clientele, and it's once they're booked, then it's basically just a normal train seat that you can sit in.
And so it sounds like with the couchette arrangement, it sounds like those are almost in their entirety specially built carriages. Whereas it sounds like what you're saying with DreamSuite is that it's a seat that can then be retrofitted into existing carriages,
Yes.
and therefore converts them. And it sounds like what you're saying with so what else does DreamSuite do? Because it's not, I mean, whilst you can sleep in it, yes, great, but actually it sounds like it's a place that you can do a lot more. You can work more comfortably. You can eat. You can have. I mean, you can work. What paint a picture about what DreamSuite offers that existing seats don't, and why it's a good thing.
So first and foremost, on our journey of exploration, we heard that comfort is a massive issue on trains. So seats tend to be very much they all come from the same kind of stable, is fair to say, and they're kind of comfortable up to a certain point, and then they start to become very uncomfortable, especially a long distance seat. So you tend to find maybe something akin to a commuter train on a long distance product, and it's not fit for purpose, but it's not where the customer expects it to be, especially the kind of money that they're paying for. So that's the first point, is that DreamSuite will offer a comfortable seat that will allow you to sit in an upright position, has armrests that are adjustable, but also can go into a recline position and more of a kind of lazy Z lounging position, because there's a footstool as well for you to put your feet up. So it's more like you're in your favorite kind of room at home, your chill out room. Off the back of that as well, what it's allowed us to also, the product that I've developed allows you to essentially work, rest and play. And I know that sounds like a kind of cliche thing, but it's about making a product that's for every person. It's not just for business customers with deep pockets, or rich tourists, should we say, as well, that sometimes some of these higher end products will kind of attract. We want this to be a product that actually is attainable for families, for people with disability in particular, people with reduced mobility as well. Disability is a huge thing right now, but equally it's about people traveling on their own that want privacy, and also families as well that want conviviality, that want to be able to talk to each other. So we've developed a product that allows for all of those. Equally, there's a big thing that's come out is around luggage and luggage storage and personal luggage storage on a train. So what we've done as well with DreamSuite is actually we've accommodated luggage storage within the actual pod itself, and that's a personal luggage storage that's secure. People no longer have to think about where their carry-on bag is at the far end near the vestibule, in a place that's unseen or unsighted for them. Is my bag still going to be there when I disembark the train? It's actually next to them, and also there's also hanging space as well. Instead of what you traditionally would get is a little hook to put your coat on, we're giving you where DreamSuite allows you to hang your coat on a hanger and keep it smart, or your suit can hang and be flat, and so it's as good as when you came on board. It's in the same condition as when you left. Much the same as the experience. So these are all experiences that and experiences I developed within aviation, and I'm trying to bring that to rail, but bringing it in a way that it's attainable for everyone. And so there are what I've come up with is a solution where you have a lounging seat which can be upright. It has a tray table which deploys, which you can work at, you can eat your food at. It has a shield in the center that drops down, so it allows you to communicate with the passenger who's traveling with you. So you can open up that space, or you can keep it private. It has doors where you can shut the doors, so you can create your own little pod and you can work in privacy. We also heard as well, there's a situation now where business passengers, and I am coming back to business passengers because they're just as important as everybody else, is lots of companies, big companies now, are not allowing them to work on trains because it's actually a public environment. So there's a privacy element there about, so they're not actually allowed to do that.
Their internal security
Yeah,
policies say you
yeah,
can't work in a public place. You
yeah,
can't have your computer open.
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So what we've tried to do is to try to create a product that is for every person. And, and at the moment, the concept is there. It's there. And what we produced was a 1-to-1 scale mock-up, which we showed. We opened our doors to DreamSuite last Thursday in partnership with Alstom, and they hosted us at their Derby site, which was incredible. And we had 60 or 70 individuals from the industry who came and saw the product. They sat in the seat. We've created the mechanism, etc. And this is very much at this moment in time, this is a demonstrator. It's not something you can put on a train, but we are hoping now to take this forward and to be able to actually get this to a point where we want to test it on a train, and hopefully, then move forward from there.
What's the commercial case then for a rail operator to consider DreamSuite as a product? What does it enable them to do? Are they able to offer more services, different services? Are they able to kind of compete in different ways?
Yeah, so the commercial case, and like as I said to you before, the good operation breeds good customer experience. If your operations are, up to the standards, then they will deliver a great customer. They have the ability to create to deliver great customer experience. And number one, if you compare this with a couchette arrangement, it's twice the capacity. Number two,
Really? Okay.
yes, and I'm just broad brush now, but these are, if you compare it from the numbers that we looked at, it's twice the capacity in the same carriage, same size carriage. If you also then think about the fact that these are single pods, you can sell them as single pods, so every seat can be occupied. So you never end up with a situation where you have a couchette, where a single bed, somebody's got a double suite, but actually it can only be occupied by one person because they are traveling on their own. So again, there are other commercial situations as well where you can drive revenue at different parts of the day, so that the seat can also be a long distance seat during the day. It could be a sleeper product in the night. So you can sweat your asset a bit harder, should we say, because there's flexibility built into it. And also you can generate more revenue, or you have upsell opportunities from the standard class to the premium class. So you can actually entice people to say, well, and we know you're traveling in standard, but how about you pay X and you can now have a bed? And so you've got that opportunity, whereas you don't have that because there's a limited amount of space with a couchette.
Yes.
But that being said, what on our journey as well, what we've also realised is there's an opportunity here for DreamSuite to sit between standard and the couchette in a sleeper product. It could be a third class, a bit like a premium economy, so to speak, as you would find in an airline. So it could be that middle ground, that real sweet spot, which would be much more attainable to more people. And then there is also a commercial advantage as well around the service that you provide to the customer. So how you actually, because the product leads into a different way of creating customer experience. You have a new platform to base your customer experience on, rather than a traditional kind of method.
So you're saying that what like at seat services and things like that, you could begin to imagine ways of doing things. Okay,
and also there is one final thing, and this goes back to my customer experience passions and needs to satisfy customer experience, is that if you have two carriages, let's say of DreamSuite, what's to say that you can't use technology to segregate specific passenger groups? So that you might have business passengers together and you might have families together, and you could start to split the carriage in a way that means that because people have got privacy or have got the ability not to be private, you can actually segregate those customers and put them into groups, which will allow you then to serve their needs better.
Right. So what you're talking about is from like a booking point of view, you can begin to, when you understand who those who those passengers are, you can begin
Yeah.
to respond to their preferences. I mean, they might want to be in a family group or be away from a family group, or be next to colleagues. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I was intrigued by a point you said about having it as a long distance train during the day where you can relax in, and then actually converting it to an overnight sleeper. And that's interesting, because that begins to put it on a much kind of more competitive footing to an airline. You think, like, if you're going to, let's say let's business. Let's say you're traveling some of business. You have all that stuff about getting to the airport, getting your plane, getting to your destination. Maybe you have to get a hotel. When you're there as well. That all racks up the travel bill. But actually, if you have a really comfortable sleeper product, that's all part of the fare, surely. So then you can be offering something that's far more competitive, and then you can be going from a city centre location, get on your train, relax, again, the work setting again, do some work, prepare what you need to prepare for, have a meal, relax, entertainment, sleep, wake up refreshed, off you go, boom, boom. It feels like it perhaps economically it begins to stack up and offer something that's much more competitive and frankly more relaxing. I mean, we know planes are fast, but that experience can be quite exhausting. It's quite a lot of interchanges you as a passenger need to make to get to where you need to get to. A lot of sort of hurry up and wait that occurs. But
Yeah.
the sort of the more sort of like generally the sort of the relaxed flow of a train leads to a better experience, and you can look out of a window and see the world go by, which is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, no, I completely agree. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Around, one of the other things that we haven't talked about yet is that the fact this interconnection between, in particular, when we were talking about Europe earlier on, and there is an obvious situation with Europe where some of the destinations within Europe are not easily served by aircraft. And also, when you're talking about business and people thinking about, actually, how can I be more sustainable, but also how can I be more effective with the money that I'm spending? And in particular, like us, we're a small company. Why wouldn't you work if you had a meeting in London, let's say, and you needed to be in Edinburgh the next day? Why wouldn't you do your meeting in London, then jump on an overnight train with one of these sleeping pods and wake up the next morning? If you've got all the amenities in Edinburgh, let's say, just for argument's sake, you can go off and have a shower and you can refresh yourself, and then you go to your meeting the next day. You've used your time effectively, very, very effectively and efficiently, and also cost effectively as well, because you haven't had to pay for a hotel. You haven't had to pay to go to a restaurant and sit and eat, and all of these things that come to you.
And that's all money that the rail operator can be charging for. So Nik, I'm really fascinated by sort of the implications of this when you think of the sort of the wider rail infrastructure. And let's say we now have trains that are going between distant locations, and therefore customers are going to need more stuff. What does that potentially mean for things like the surrounding infrastructure, like the design of stations, the facilities at stations? We talked about, didn't we? Like it will even still on board the train. Like does that mean different designs to carriages around restrooms and to being able to shower or refresh as you do get on some airlines? That's on the train. What does it mean in terms of the stations and the end-to-end kind of experience that people are having? Do you see implications there?
I think it would. This, as with anything, a kind of new idea can breed other new ideas, and it actually gives credence to trying something new as well. So, for instance, why can't stations become more of a hub? Why can't they be? Why we don't have to put everything on the train? We can actually have, as we've shown, you can have good facilities on either side of your destination. And actually, you can keep the train being a train. People are very used to and very versed to traveling long distances in this environment on a plane. They'll do London to the West Coast, and they don't necessarily have to have a shower in those 11 hours they're traveling. So, people are familiar with this environment, but what you can do is you can start to offer, again, more amenities, better amenities at the destination to allow people to what actually, embellishes the whole experience. And that could be available to people at different levels. It doesn't have to just be the people with the deepest pocket.
And does it, like from a rail planning point of view, is there such a thing as rail planning? But this idea, does it sort of begin to refresh old routes or open up old routes? Does it kind of create more connections between places than it would have done before? We're very used to having direct kind of intercities and all that kind of stuff. But does it open up more interesting routes that weren't potentially economically viable at one time?
Yeah. Well, we've actually developed new routes because of this product. So that's part of what the work that we've done is that we've created an opportunity here to look at maybe different routes within the UK that could be served. And we've tested those with some of the stakeholders that we've interviewed, and they've been received very well. And I think that's the thing here is that a product like DreamSuite starts to open people's horizons a little bit more and say, well, we don't have to stick with the status quo. We don't have to be where we are today. We need to if you're going to shift the bar, actually all of a sudden it starts, why can't you in the future, I'd like to say, and I'm not suggesting this is something that could happen right away, but why can't you have a train why couldn't you connect the services from Ireland, for instance, across the Irish Sea to Wales, then through and then go into Paris? Why couldn't that happen? The art of the possible is here. And I think rail in particular, I stated this as our opening event, is that if you look at mass transit, there is no more efficient way to move thousands of people in one go than rail in one direction. You to translate people back and forth, and from an economic standpoint, but also a sustainability standpoint, it's a massive. It's something that's not being tapped into enough, I feel, and I think that's where France have put their best foot forward here for the rest of Europe, but also the rest of the world in a way, is that they are looking at this with a slightly more open eyes than some others, and they pushed forward with it. Whether it's always going to meet with some criticism and some kind of conjecture, but actually, without these kind of shifts and moves towards a better and brighter future for the next generations to come, then how are we going to move forward?
No, exactly. So, and it reminds me, one of the other things that you mentioned when we spoke about this before, which I think is so brilliant, is the way that products like DreamSuite are going to kind of extend the life of existing rolling stock. So from a sustainability point of view, that's incredibly important to find ways to reuse things. And so we might have some, slightly aging rolling stock, which, maybe the interiors are aging, but actually the fundamental engineering of it isn't. But to just kind of refresh it and to create. And is there a lot of this stock in rail yards around the world that's not being used that could be used?
Yeah, and there is a lot of. There's no two ways about it. There's a lot of old rolling stock that's sitting in a shed somewhere. There's a lot of new rolling stock that's been built and it's in place now. But absolutely, our fundamental standpoint from when we started the idea of DreamSuite was that it should be sustainable from the outset, and we should not just look at this being put onto shiny new trains. It should be able to, and we still fundamentally believe that it should be retrofittable to other rolling stock. And obviously there's complexities involved in that. We're not saying that that's an easy thing to do, but it should be looked at. And part of that, the genealogy or the way that the product has kind of evolved over the last year is that it's become very modular in its design. I set out to design this from a modular perspective. So it means that cost of ownership is baked into it from the start. You're using mirrored parts, essentially, which can be tooled and then just turned around and click together to create the opposite hand. Thinking about that from a maintenance perspective means that actually in the future, it would mean it's probably more compatible to then put onto old rolling stock as well. Because if you're thinking about taking things off and putting them on easily, that's going to lend itself to actually the vision that we had about for our sustainability vision, which is this should be able to go on older rolling stock and it should be there to be refreshed. Why would you scrap that old rolling stock when you can reuse it? It seems such a waste.
So what are your hopes for DreamSuite in terms of perhaps the way it changes people's perception about rail and what it can do for them? How would you like to see? What are your hopes for that? What would you like to see happen?
Well, we had a really good reaction in the press to what we've done, and that was amazing. You know, we also had a fantastic reaction from the industry as well, and equally, you know, we've had a lot of support from Alstom, which has been amazing, and they've been really incredible. What how they've helped us, and you know, as a starter to have such a great, you know, an amazing kind of historical brand to help
And
us
just
has been been fantastic.
and also they're like a train manufacturer, aren't they? Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. They're one of the
Okay.
biggest train manufacturers in the world. So, and they have a base in Derby, but they're international as well. So they're huge company, multinational, huge amount of history, huge amount of rail history. And the site that we're on was essentially the home of railway in the UK, as far as I understand. So it's steeped in history, and they've got the most incredible people. We should be really proud of them as you know, because they're sometimes they're the unseen. It's the unseen stuff as well. You know, it's not always obvious. And this is the thing with rail. It doesn't. I feel like it doesn't promote itself enough. It doesn't actually realise how great it is. I think we've lost sight of how amazing rail is. It's been part of the fabric of the UK for like a century, and yet, you know, it's kind of like the forgotten. Feels a bit forgotten, and it needs to be brought back up. It needs to be the phoenix rising from the fire.
So it's been incredibly well received, which is fantastic to hear. From a customer's point of view, what would you like the what change would you like to see in terms of the customer's kind of reaction to it? That actually, for example, that actually rail is becoming that real kind of credible alternative to aviation.
I think I would like to see new people come into rail. I think there's people who use rail, but I want to see people positively gravitate towards rail, see it as a positive option to not to leave the car at home. You don't always have to leave. There's no doubt about it that the car is an amazing thing, and you know, we have EVs, more and more EVs coming out every day, and it's, you know, but there's no two ways about it. You get on the M25, you're stuck in congestion. Why not sit on a train and enjoy the relaxation? But in order to enjoy the relaxation, we have to kind of solve some of those road humps that exist in rail that are predominantly to do with the experience associated with it, and we have to kind of ditch the negativity that's associated with it.
And there are an enormous number of sort of experiential opportunities. There also feels that there are the big sort of elephants in the room are around things like the franchise model, and you know how a rail company can operate you know profitably as it needs to be able to kind of invest in these things and provide value for customers. And that's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it is. It is, and I would say, I know I'd like to. Yeah, you make a really good point. I'd like to see more freedoms given to the operators, or does the? I mean, speaking quite openly here, does the government just take back control of the railway itself? Do we end up back at this like single sort of information and guardianship, rather than having these sporadic kind of areas where there's a lot of grey, where people don't quite know what they can do and what they can't do? And, you know, do we have to have the single source of the truth? I've been talking about that throughout my career. The single source of the truth is kind of key. If you want to move forward with things, you have to have a single voice in this. And I think that's where railway doesn't quite work at the moment. Still doesn't work. It's very confusing and ambiguous.
Single voice. We need that for sure. Nik, listen, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on the show. It really has. We're going to put all sorts of stuff in the description here. So links to DreamSuite and what you've been doing and press releases, etc. Wish you the very, very best. It is an absolutely fantastic product. When I saw it, I was blown away. And, you know, you're there thinking about your experiences of trains. You know, you want to get on. You can't rest in the seats. Well, I can't rest in the seats. You know, they're never designed the right way. You know, if you're lucky to get a table, a 4-person table in a train, you might be able to work, but you're like a Tyrannosaurus, you know, typing on your keyboard. And then if anybody else sits down there, you can't do it. You can't multitask. You can't have, you know, a sandwich and a drink and whatever. You're continually anxious about where your luggage is. And there are so many things that are, you know, like fundamentals that aren't quite right about the rail experience that DreamSuite offers a really kind of intelligent solution for. So I really do wish you the absolute best of it. Will you keep in touch with us? It would be great to get you back in the future and hear more about what's going on. And I suspect it's not the first or the last innovation that you guys are going to be working on. So there's
I have some more
in the oven.
Yeah. There's more up here. Although don't be duped by the grey hair. There's more going on in here than you can see.
You're a very talented 20-year-old, that's for sure. Brilliant.
Oh, I'll definitely come back because of that.
Fantastic. Nik, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us on CXD. Don't forget to share CXD on all your channels and look out for new episodes. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.